So where are we going to go? Well, I think some companies, and we've heard their names today, Hewlett-Packard, BP, Nestle, these sorts of people, Walmart, have no option. I mean, they're in a goldfish bowl and they can't escape it. And they've got to learn to live with that. And some, I think, already do it quite well. Others, and I might take Apple as an example, this, as you may remember, was their iMac, are going to be really clever, become really clever at showing us some bits of what they do and not showing other bits. So in English, that would be translucent, not transparency, but translucence. So here you can see into the thing, but you can't see the black box in the middle. And Apple is a really strange company in the sense that it's so incredibly successful, and yet it's so bad at transparency. And when it even started to do the environment and recycling stuff on its website, it was pathetic. I mean, it looked like a school project. They weren't paying serious attention. So some will be in conditions of ultra-transparency, some will be in the middle, and whether we like it or not, some will be in just pure stealth. They will be trying to hide away what they're doing. Now, some of those will be people in the shadow economy, wanting to cover up what they do. But I've always said there will come a time in all of this where you suddenly see certain parts of the economy going stealthy, starting to disappear. Why? Because they're starting to work on radically innovative new technologies, new business models, and they're holding them close to their chests before they bring them out to market. And earlier this year, I took 19 founders and CEOs of clean technology companies from Europe to Silicon Valley to meet venture capitalists, to meet mainstream business, to meet government players there as well. And we were all very struck at how good the venture capitalists, the technologists in California have become at playing that stealth game. And just when we were there, a new technology was launched to huge media coverage. It was called the Bloom Box. It's a sort of a fuel cell. Well, that had been in stealth for 10 years. So I think we're going to see stealth as often a bad thing, but sometimes a good thing. And that needs management. And this is just a metaphor for where we're headed. When I first started to use computers in the 1960s, they literally looked like that. You used punch cards. When I actually started working, we started to get the IBM personal computer sort of technology. More personal, but not networked, not even part of local area networks for the most part at that stage. It was all done by disks. Just think of iTunes now and services like that, where it isn't simply something where you buy, it's something where you can post your commentary, you can see what other people think of music, you can have recommendations. That's very different to what we might have expected in the PC area. And then I think the good guide approach is the beginning of something very much more powerful. And it's not just the technology, it's the apps. It's the fact that anything now can be put out for a very, very low cost, sold at the moment through the Apple Store, but it'll go much wider quite quickly, I think. And people will have access to levels of information about the competitive performance of your products, your companies, in ways that are unimaginable. I'm just going to use a couple of final slides, but before I do that, any questions or thoughts? I'll keep going. So where are we going next? Well, some of you will recognize this as a cabinet meeting, a meeting of a government, the government of the Maldives. It was just ahead of the Copenhagen conference, and they were trying to dramatize climate change and sea level rises. My personal view, we're headed into climate change on a scale that is, again, very difficult to get our brains around. But it isn't just climate change. And I think all of your companies, in whatever form you communicate or engage with the wider world or hold yourself accountable, face a problem. If it were just climate change, that might be manageable. But late last year, and in fact just before the Copenhagen conference, sustainability with a Canadian organization, GlobeScan, did one of a series of surveys we do every 6 years. And these were experts in corporate responsibility and sustainability around the world. And it was a surprise, because when we asked what issues these people saw as either very urgent or urgent, it wasn't just 1 or 2 or 3, it's 12 that come in as urgent and therefore are on the agenda for business and governments. And also look where climate change sits. I mean, it was second to clean water, and poverty was at a level which would have been quite extraordinary if you'd seen that 10 years ago. A bunch of other things also there. And this is just an attempt to map the extent to which these issues, on the one hand, on the vertical axis, are urgent for all of us, critically important for all of us, and on this axis, the horizontal axis, the extent to which companies have the power to address these. The area that we're talking about to some considerable degree today of corporate transparency and accountability, however it's done, printed reports, social media, or whatever, comes in pretty low in, but still in the box which is urgent and very much under the control of companies. As you go further over, things become more problematic. So if you think about what I was talking about earlier on, in companies being asked to change behaviors of people. So I'm a food manufacturer. People eat too much of my food and they become fat, and that has problems with chronic disease like diabetes. That maps in a very different space. So I would actually challenge whether that is not, I think it's actually more important than people were ranking it, but I agree that companies will wrestle with that. So the question is, should companies be talking about those issues in their wider communication and engagement? I think they should. This is the final slide. You won't be able to read it, but this is simply to make a recommendation. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development, most of you will know, something like 200 CEOs of major companies involved in that. They've just completed this study called Vision 2050. It's signed off by 29 of those CEOs. And what I find interesting is not just the time scale or the breadth of issues that they covered, but the sorts of things they're starting to talk about. Incentives for behavior change. So companies are starting to be driven into not just how do you design your product, how do you market your product in a responsible way, not simply how do you engineer your process so that it has a low footprint or whatever, but how do you interact with the people in your supply chain, your consumers and so on, in a way that makes them move towards more sustainable or healthier behaviors. So if you want a copy of the GRI report, it's downloadable for free from the Volans website. There is a lot more in it, including recommendations for government and for business. But perhaps I'll stop it there. We've still got about 12, 13 minutes. So if people want to involve themselves in a discussion, I'm at your disposal. Yes, at the back. Do we have a microphone? Yes, the microphone's just coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Alexiou, and I represent Titan Cement Company. Because you said you have joined Global Reporting Initiative, but you compromise with them in order to be able to be provocative, I would like to ask you something also.
I'm sorry, I'm getting an incredible boom off the...
You said that you wanted to be provocative with the Global Reporting Initiative.
Yes.
So I would like to make a provocative question to you about Global Reporting Initiative.
Please do.
How do you feel for the decision of the initiative to relate assurance levels and the higher assurance level of reporters to only one principle, that is materiality, and forget about the rest of the GRI principles on reporting. Because if we consider that all principles, like quality, neutrality, are equally important,
yeah.
Why to continue to consider a report as valuable or as more important or more valid when only one principle is really applied throughout the report? Do you agree with this choice?
Again, I only got bits of the, it's like listening in Skype. Bits of the message came through and others didn't. But you were saying, if I caught it right, that the GRI approach focuses on one materiality angle rather than the others. I have to declare an interest. Yes, I'm on the board of the GRI. I think stakeholder approaches to standards are a worthwhile experiment. I have a problem, though, and that is that when you have many stakeholders that come into a process of setting a standard and deciding what is the right way forward and what not, you get a lot of politics, and because of that, you get a lot of complexity. And I think the reason why people, and as a result, I think the GRI framework and the principles and the rules and so on are really quite complicated for many companies to get their brains around. That's the first point. The second is that one way of trying to deal with that challenge of complexity and where do we start was to take, as you know, the materiality concept from the world of accounting and cross-apply it to sustainability reporting. And I have to say that our own organization, Sustainability, pushed that very, very hard. And I think it's been useful, and the reason I put the SAP matrix up is I think not only is it useful to see what the company thinks, but I think it's interesting to see, well, it's vital, essential, to see it in the context of what other people think on the same points. But I think GRI is very early on in its evolution, and I think, can I ask, do you go to the GRI conferences and make the point that you've just made there? We, for example, in Amsterdam.
I'm sorry, I didn't have time to go for the conference, but because I happen to use GRI for many years now, I have written my comments, of course. In any case, I had the chance to participate in a consultation process with them.
Well, can I make an offer? Because I think the problem with all institutions is certain voices get heard and others do not get heard. And certain people turn up and others do not. And some of the people who turn up are professionals in a good way, and some of the people who turn up are professionals in a rather more complicated way. So you get a really confused set of messages. If you would like, I'll give you my email address. If you want me to send me very clearly what you want me to tell the board of GRI, I will do it. And just to go back again, I think that institution is very, very early on in its own evolution, and something you're just beginning to see is a huge new focus on that I in Tigers, which is integrated reporting, by which people mean not just economic, not just social, not just environmental, but all of these put together in a way that is just completely knitted together. And there's a new book that's come out called One Report from a Harvard group. It's Bob Eccles and Mike Cruz. And they give all sorts of examples of companies that are headed towards some form of integration. It's interesting that the main company that they pick is United Technologies, and they give an example of their online reporting. I don't think United Technologies reporting is actually a tremendously good model, in addition to which they're a defense contractor, and so some of the issues that the outside world might see as material are actually not terribly well covered in their reporting. But that report integration push is coming very strongly, and it could even be that GRI will be pushed to one side and a completely new set of institutions will come through. So if you value GRI and if you would like it to do the right thing, communicate direct, but if I can take the message back, very happy to do that. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Going to your last slide, without looking too much at the details, you mentioned how some of the steps that will have to be taken will mean for a company to look in an integrated way what it is doing, how it is doing it, the marketing, the customers, all the interaction. And as a very simple example here, can you hear me?
Yes, but there's an incredible boom. So
I don't know what to do about it.
if you speak slower, it may.
Okay, I think it's a question of feedback. Xerox has gone into what is called servicizing, and they communicate with their customers, and they try to make, not just to sell machines, copy machines, but to make a study as to how will be the most effective way to use those machines. In the process, this means that they might sell less machines.
Yeah.
Now this is a very, very great step forward. And Xerox, inside Xerox, in some areas, they did not like this. So the question is, do you believe that the governance that exists now in companies is ready for such a step? Going towards sustainability, the way you described it, might mean that some parts of their own business will be reduced, and perhaps other parts will be augmented.
It's a very difficult question. It's a question that people like me should be asked. And the answer comes in different levels. So, to part of your question, companies that are invested in obsolete, old, dangerous technologies, they have what's called sunk capital. They don't want to lose that. So actually, they fight really, really hard to protect that. So if you think about the era when we had the Antarctic ozone hole and the CFC, chlorofluorocarbon industry, was under pressure, there was a huge pushback from the chemical industry, some parts of it, to be allowed to continue to produce CFCs until they'd run off that investment in plant. They were stopped. But when they were stopped, the black market came in. And if you were in Russia or in China, you could get CFCs perfectly easily. But it's interesting that much of the profitability of CFC chemistry came in right at the end of that industry. And that's another thing that makes it very hard to say to an industry, that's the end, stop. But I think we have to do it. I think there are certain industries that we simply have to kill. And if I go back to, I was partly raised in Cyprus. There were huge holes up in the Triodos Mountains where asbestos was mined. I spent some time with the asbestos industry in the 1970s, and they were still arguing asbestos is a safety product, it will go on forever, and some of us will say, no, it has to be stopped, and you've got to stop it sooner rather than later. I think even if you cannot ban these things completely, what you can do is get the insurance market to start to pay proper attention to the risks. So it's no accident if you look at not just the insurance companies, but the people who invest in, or insure the insurers, the reinsurers, people like Swiss Re, Munich Re, they're getting extremely worried about climate change because they can see where it's going. They can already see the signals in the risks that they're being caught by, the impacts of extreme weather conditions. So to part of your question, I think you've got to try and lobby governments because they have ultimate authority. You've got to try and get business to lobby governments. So Wayne Visser had one of his slides which looked at what a growing number of companies are doing now to bring pressure on the federal government in the US and governments in the European Union to regulate greenhouse gases. you've got to expose what companies are doing where it is wrong, which is where the NGO and media side comes in very powerfully. But just to try and conclude, I think on industry after industry, on product after product, we're going to get into this really difficult space of governments and others saying to business, you've got to change. If you're going to sell that product, you're going to have to change the way that people use it. Now, we saw that with insecticides in the early days. We've seen it with a range of other products. But I think this is going to open out across a much broader spectrum of products and services that business offers for some of the reasons I described. And my own personal sense is business does not know how to do that yet. And the question is it right to ask them to do that, or should we just ban the products completely? I don't know the answer. I don't think we're going to be able to ban them. I think we're going to have to do the other piece, but it's going to be challenging. But if you have time afterwards, I'm very happy to continue the conversation. Yeah. Michael. There was... It's working.
Early this morning, the other distinguished speaker, Mr. Visser, told us something about the ISO 26000. And there was also one of your comments that China is putting through some 10,000 standards as well.
Yeah.
For the past 10 years, we've been experiencing several standards and in reporting and in strategy sometimes. And as you know, CSR comes on a voluntary basis. Do you agree that maybe it's time, as in Denmark, that in other countries as well, CSR should be regulated?
That CSR should be regulated. It's very difficult. I sometimes describe CSR as a bit like a snowball, and sustainability is an even bigger snowball. It just rolls and rolls, and one issue after another gets caught up in it. It's very difficult to lose any of those. So how can you regulate something that is so big and so complex? Yes, I think we have to decide on what the ultimate priorities are, and then regulations mean that people in many countries do the right thing, but there are many countries where regulations, Italy would be a prime example. They adopt most European directives, but then do nothing about them. So I don't see regulation as an automatic answer. I think transparency very often is not an automatic answer, but if you can give ordinary citizens for example, 2006, the fires, you showed me the book last night. If you could give people the home addresses of the people who started most of those fires, if you could give them the home addresses of the people who benefited from the development that then followed, I suspect you might have a slight change in behaviors. Maybe people would move home or address more often. But I think transparency used in an aggressive way is actually increasingly needed. Who will do that? Not governments. It's too political. Not business. Again, it's too political. It's going to have to be. It's going to have to be NGOs and
watchdogs. The watchdogs.
The which?
Watchdogs.
The watchdogs, but quite often in the countries that are the greatest problems in relation to some of these issues, the watchdogs are very weak. So in China, for example, I'm on the Council of Ambassadors of the World Wildlife Fund, or Worldwide Fund for Nature, and in China, that cannot be an NGO. It has to be a limited company. And NGOs are very, very tightly regulated if they're allowed at all. And then they're sort of very constrained in terms of what they can say. So the watchdogs, yes, but quite often it's going to have to be international watchdogs playing into countries like that. But in the end, that's very dangerous because you enable a China or whatever country it is to blame this on international influences. So we've got to build the local NGO and civil society infrastructure. And I think that's partly what you and your colleagues are doing, investing some of your revenues back into the world of NGOs, which I think is extremely healthy. Was the one over here? Or gone to sleep?
Σηκώστε το χέρι σας λίγο. Έχετε κάποια ερώτηση?
And if not, my email is john@volans.com, and I'll be outside for a short while afterwards. We're very happy to continue the conversations. Thank you very much indeed.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you.